My parents treated me like their servant until a CEO worth millions praised my $5 million contract win. Stay with me till the end, and if my story touches your heart, I'd love for you to support our channel by subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing it with someone who needs to hear this. My name is Danielle Whitaker, and for as long as I can remember, my parents never saw me as their daughter. They saw me as free labor. Growing up in our small house, every morning started the same. My mom, Lorraine, would call my name before the sun was up, and by the time Preston, my brother, woke up to a warm breakfast, I had already cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, and started cooking. Preston was the golden child. He never had to do chores, never heard the sharp tone of my mother's voice, and never once got blamed for anything. When guests came over, my parents bragged about him as if he were some star. "Preston's going to be someone great," my father, Marvin, would say proudly. I would be standing in the background, holding a tray of food I had just cooked, invisible. It hurt, even as a little girl, to know that nothing I did was ever enough. If I got good grades, they barely noticed. If Preston brought home an average report card, they threw a little party. I remember one night when I was around 12, I had stayed up late helping with Preston's school project, cutting and gluing pieces together while he played video games. He got an A. My parents praised him for being so smart, and I just sat there silently, my hands still sticky with glue. I wasn't their child, I was their maid. Every Saturday, while other kids played outside or went to movies with friends, I was scrubbing floors or babysitting cousins. My parents always said, family comes first, but what they meant was, Preston comes first. The unfairness built up inside me like a fire. I wanted to shout, to ask why they didn't love me the same way, but instead, I kept quiet. I told myself maybe one day, if I worked hard enough, they'd finally see me. But deep down, I knew the truth. They weren't going to change. As I grew older, the chores only piled higher. My mother would hand me grocery lists and remind me to make dinner before she even thought about asking how my day was. My father barely looked at me unless something needed fixing. And Preston? He smirked, enjoying his throne as the favorite child. What they didn't know, though, was that all those years of being pushed down were building something inside me. A quiet strength. A hunger to prove myself. I didn't know when or how, but I promised myself that one day, I wouldn't just be the servant in the background. I would be someone they couldn't ignore. That day, though, was still far away. For now, I was just Danielle, the daughter who cooked, cleaned, and lived in the shadow of the golden boy. But the fire inside me was only getting hotter. Danielle had always believed that if she worked hard enough, her parents would finally see her worth. She pushed herself through school, spending long nights hunched over textbooks, pouring her energy into every assignment. When the day came that she earned top grades and a full scholarship to study business, her heart swelled with pride. For once, she thought, Lorraine and Marvin would look at her with the same admiration they always reserved for Preston. But the celebration she dreamed of never came. When she told them about the scholarship, Marvin barely looked up from his newspaper. "That's nice," he muttered, "but your brother is going to law school. Now that's something to be proud of." Preston smirked, leaning back in his chair as though the world had already crowned him successful. "Guess that means I'll be the first lawyer in the family," he said, basking in the attention. Lorraine, instead of congratulating Danielle, shook her head. "Scholarships don't mean much. It's just free school. Preston's going to have a real career. You just got lucky." The word stung, sharper than anything Danielle had felt before. She had worked for this, earned it, sacrificed sleep and weekends. Yet, in her parents' eyes, her success was nothing compared to Preston's mediocre path. When she left for college, Danielle quickly realized life wasn't going to get easier. Her scholarship covered tuition, but living expenses were on her shoulders. She took a job at a local diner, working nights after long days of classes. Her feet ached, her eyes burned from exhaustion, but she told herself it was worth it. Still, even while she struggled, her parents never stopped demanding more. Lorraine would call her on weekends, her voice sharp. "Don't forget to send money home. Your father and I need help with the bills, and Preston has his studies to focus on." Danielle swallowed her frustration and wired small amounts whenever she could, even if it meant skipping meals or cutting back on textbooks. She told herself she was being a good daughter, fulfilling her role in the family. But deep down, a quiet bitterness began to grow. The final straw came at a family gathering. Relatives filled the living room, laughter echoing off the walls. Danielle had just finished explaining to her aunt how she balanced school with work when Lorraine's voice cut through the air. "Preston will be a lawyer," she announced proudly, beaming at her son. Then, with a laugh that carried across the room, she added, "And Danielle? Well, she just works shifts at some diner." The room erupted with chuckles. Danielle felt the blood rush to her face, her throat tight as she forced a small smile. Inside, she was breaking. In that moment, she saw the truth clearly. Her family didn't care about her dreams or her effort. They only cared about what she could give them, her labor, her money, her obedience. Not her worth. Not her heart. That night, as she lay awake in her dorm, Danielle whispered to herself, "I'll prove them wrong." And for the first time, she meant it with every fiber of her being. Danielle's days blurred together into a constant cycle of work, school, and exhaustion. During the week, she split her time between 2 part-time jobs. One in the diner where she waited tables until midnight, and another in the campus library, shelving books and helping students. By the time she finished studying after her shifts, the sun was already creeping through her window. Sleep became a luxury, but she pushed herself forward, reminding herself she had goals no one else could take away. Yet even as she worked herself thin, her parents continued to treat her as if her time belonged to them. Every Friday, without fail, Lorraine called. "Danielle, don't forget you're coming home this weekend. The house needs cleaning, and I need you to prepare Sunday dinner. Preston has been busy studying, so it's all on you." Danielle wanted to protest, to say she had assignments due or shifts scheduled, but the guilt weighed heavy. Each time, she packed her bag and made the long trip home, only to be greeted with lists of chores. The weekends were the worst. Saturday mornings started with scrubbing floors, dusting furniture, and running errands across town for her mother. Sunday afternoons were spent in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and stirring pots while Lorraine relaxed in the living room and Preston sat at the table, scrolling on his phone. One Sunday, as Danielle carried a heavy tray to the table, Preston smirked and said loudly, "You're basically mom's maid. Maybe you should wear an apron with your name stitched on it." Everyone laughed, except Danielle. She felt heat rise in her chest, but she bit her tongue, setting the food down carefully. No one noticed the way her hands shook. Later that night, as she scrubbed dishes while the others watched TV, the words kept echoing in her head. "You're basically mom's maid." He wasn't wrong. That's exactly how they treated her. It didn't matter that she was in college, juggling 2 jobs, or that she barely had energy left to breathe. To them, she was still just the girl who cooked, cleaned, and served. But something shifted inside her that night. The humiliation, the exhaustion, the constant disregard. It all began to harden into something else. For the first time, Danielle felt a flicker of anger that didn't fade. As she boarded the bus back to campus the next morning, her body aching and her backpack heavy with textbooks, she stared out the window and whispered to herself, "I won't do this forever." She didn't know how yet. She didn't know when. But she was certain of one thing. She would not stay trapped in this cycle. That tiny spark of determination was small, but it burned brighter with every cruel word and every chore forced onto her shoulders. Her family thought she was their servant. What they didn't realize was that they were slowly building the fire that would one day push her far beyond their control. Thanksgiving had always been Danielle's least favorite holiday. While other families gathered to celebrate love and gratitude, hers became a stage for Preston to be praised and for her to be ignored. That year, though, Danielle walked into her parents' house with a rare spark of pride. She had just landed a prestigious internship at a well-known marketing firm, something students fought fiercely to get. It felt like the first real step toward her dreams, and she was eager, just this once, for her parents to acknowledge her achievement. The table was crowded with relatives, plates piled high with turkey, stuffing, and pies. Conversation filled the room, and Danielle waited patiently for a pause, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Finally, when everyone settled, she spoke up. "I wanted to share some news. I just got accepted into a top internship program at a marketing firm. It's a huge opportunity for me." Before she could finish, Marvin chuckled and waved a dismissive hand. "That's nice, Danielle, but have you all heard? Preston passed one of his toughest exams this semester. That boy is really on his way to becoming a lawyer." The room erupted in applause and nods of approval. Relatives turned to Preston, clapping him on the back, praising his hard work and bright future. Danielle's words had vanished into thin air, swallowed by her father's voice. She forced a smile, but her chest felt heavy. This internship was something she had worked for tirelessly. Late nights, Endless applications, interviews where she gave every ounce of confidence she could muster. And yet, in a single breath, Marvin had pushed it aside as if it meant nothing. Trying again, Danielle leaned forward. "Dad, this internship is very competitive. It could open doors." Lorraine cut her off sharply, her tone carrying that familiar edge. "Danielle, your job is to keep this family together, not chase silly dreams. You've always been the one we rely on. Don't forget where your priorities should be." The words hit like a slap. She wasn't surprised. Her mother had been reminding her of her duties for years. But hearing it spoken so openly, in front of relatives who nodded in agreement, left her throat dry. They didn't see her ambition. They didn't see her as a young woman building a future. To them, she was still the maid, the caretaker, the glue holding their comfortable lives together. Preston smirked, basking in the attention. He didn't even look her way. Danielle's heart sank, then hardened. She excused herself quietly, slipping her coat on while laughter and chatter spilled from the dining room. No one followed. No one noticed. She walked out into the cold November night, the air biting at her cheeks, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. Humiliation burned in her, but beneath it was something stronger. As she walked down the dark street alone, Danielle clenched her fists and whispered to herself, "This isn't the end of my story." For the first time, she wasn't just hurt. She was furious, and that fury was beginning to feel like power. Danielle walked into her internship determined to prove herself. The marketing firm was buzzing with sharp minds, but she refused to let the competition intimidate her. While others turned in safe, predictable work, Danielle poured her creativity into every project. She stayed late, researched beyond the assignments, and found fresh angles that impressed even the most seasoned employees. Her ideas weren't just good, they stood out. In meetings, she offered solutions that made clients raise their eyebrows in surprise and nod with approval. When others hesitated to speak up, she leaned forward with quiet confidence. Within weeks, people were whispering about the new intern who worked like she'd been in the industry for years. Among those who noticed was Clifton Hayes, a senior executive known for being tough but fair. He called her into his office one afternoon after reviewing a campaign she had helped design. "Danielle," he said, leaning back in his chair, "you've got grit. Most interns just coast through this program, but you're operating like someone who wants to change the game. I see potential in you." The words lit something inside her. For the first time in her life, someone with real influence saw her. Not as a servant, not as background noise, but as talent. Clifton began to guide her more directly, giving her challenges that stretched her skills. He pushed her, and she met every push with determination. Slowly, she began to feel she was building something that belonged to her alone. But even as her world at the firm grew brighter, her family refused to loosen their grip. Lorraine called her one Friday evening, irritation lacing her voice. "Danielle, you're coming home this weekend. The house is a mess, and I need help with Sunday dinner. Preston can't be expected to handle that. He's busy." Danielle hesitated. For years she had dropped everything to obey, but now her weekends were filled with preparation for projects and valuable networking. She took a deep breath and said softly but firmly, "I can't, Mom. I have work to do here." There was a stunned silence, then Lorraine snapped. "So you think you're too good for your own family now?" That phone call marked the beginning of a shift. Danielle started saying no more often. Each refusal made the tension worse, but it also made her feel stronger, as though she were finally reclaiming her life. Preston, of course, didn't take it well. One evening when she visited briefly, he sneered across the dinner table. "You're selfish, Danielle. You only care about yourself now. Mom and Dad raised you better than this." She looked at him, her jaw tight. For once, she didn't argue back. Inside, though, her thoughts were clear. She had carried the weight of that household for too long. If protecting her dreams made her selfish, then maybe selfish was exactly what she needed to be. And as she returned to her internship the next morning, Danielle knew she was finally stepping onto her own path, one her family could no longer control. Danielle had been carefully saving every spare dollar she earned. Between her diner shifts, her internship stipend, and the odd tutoring job on campus, she built up a modest cushion in her savings account. It wasn't much compared to others in her program, but to her, it was everything: security, independence, proof that she could stand on her own. One evening after a long day at the firm, she logged into her account to check her balance. Her heart stopped. Nearly half of her savings was gone. She refreshed the page, thinking it was a mistake, but the number didn't change. Panic clawed at her chest. She combed through the transaction history, and there it was, large withdrawals she hadn't made. She knew immediately who had access. Years ago, when she was still a teenager, her parents had insisted on being joint holders for safety. She hadn't thought much of it back then. Now, she realized what that meant. They had taken her money. The betrayal cut deeper than anything before. That money represented endless nights of exhaustion, working double shifts when her body screamed for rest, and skipping meals to save a few extra dollars. And they had stolen it, as if her effort belonged to them. She called home, her voice shaking with anger. "Why did you take my money? That account was mine. I worked for it." There was a pause before Marvin's calm, dismissive tone filled her ear. "Your brother's tuition needed to be paid, Danielle. His future is the family's future. You'll understand one day." Her breath caught. "So my future doesn't matter?" Marvin sighed, as though she were being unreasonable. "You'll be fine. You've always managed. But Preston, he needs this. We all need this. Sacrificing for him is the right thing to do." Tears welled in her eyes, but not from weakness. From fury. They hadn't even asked. They hadn't considered what it would cost her. To them, Preston's path was worth everything, while hers was nothing more than an afterthought. Lorraine chimed in from the background, her tone sharp and unapologetic. "Stop being dramatic. Families share. We did what had to be done." Danielle could barely breathe. She hung up the phone before the rage spilling inside her turned into words she couldn't take back. She sat in silence, staring at the empty numbers on her screen, feeling as if years of hard work had just been erased. But slowly, her hands curled into fists. If her parents thought they could drain her dry and still keep her chained to their idea of family duty, they were wrong. That night, Danielle made a silent vow. She would rebuild stronger than before. She would succeed without their help, without their approval, without their interference. And when she stood tall in the life she created for herself, they would realize too late that the daughter they treated like a servant had risen far beyond their reach. Never again, she promised herself. Never again would they use her. Danielle had been pushing herself to her limits at the firm, but it was finally starting to pay off. Clifton Hayes, the senior executive who had been quietly mentoring her, had seen her determination from the beginning. One afternoon, he called her into his office with a look that was both serious and encouraging. "There's someone I want you to meet," he said. "Victor Langston. He's the CEO of a major corporation we've been courting for months. He's looking for a fresh perspective on a $5 million contract, and I think you're ready to take a shot." Danielle's heart pounded. A chance like this didn't come to interns, or even many junior associates. It was an opportunity people spent years waiting for. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she replied, "I won't let you down." From that moment, her life became a blur of research, drafting, and revising. She stayed up through the night in her tiny apartment, surrounded by coffee cups and papers spread across the table. Her laptop glowed as she refined every slide, every detail of her proposal. She studied the client's history, their struggles, their competitors, and their future goals. She wasn't just putting numbers on a page. She was crafting a vision that would make them believe in her. By the third night, exhaustion tugged at her body, but her spirit was alive. She remembered every dismissal from her parents, every time they told her Preston was the only one who mattered. This was her chance to prove, not to them, but to herself, that she was capable of greatness. When the day of the pitch arrived, Danielle walked into the conference room in her best suit, her nerves hidden behind calm determination. Around the table sat Victor Langston himself, along with several of his top executives. They barely glanced at her at first, expecting another forgettable presentation. But as soon as she began, the room shifted. Her voice was clear, her ideas sharp. She spoke with passion, showing not just numbers but a story, how the contract could reshape their market, how the brand could grow, how they could connect with people in ways their competitors hadn't dared to try. By the time she finished, silence hung in the air. Then Victor leaned back, a smile spreading across his face. "Well," he said slowly, "it looks like we have our answer." Against all odds, Danielle's pitch beat out the other competitors. The contract was signed, and the deal was hers. At the closing announcement, Victor stood in front of industry leaders, reporters, and executives. He gestured toward her proudly. "Danielle Whitaker just closed a $5 million deal. Remarkable talent. Remember her name." Applause filled the room, and Danielle felt the weight of years of dismissal lift from her shoulders. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't a servant. She was Danielle Whitaker, the young woman who had just made her mark. It didn't take long for news of Danielle's victory to spread. The contract she had secured made headlines in industry circles, and her name was suddenly associated with success. Articles praised her innovative ideas, and professionals who had once overlooked her now sought her out for advice. For the first time in her life, Danielle felt she had stepped out of the shadows. And that was when the phone calls began. Lorraine's voice was sugary sweet, so different from the sharp tone Danielle had grown up with. "Oh, Danielle, your father and I are so proud of you. We always knew you were destined for something great. Remember how I used to say you'd go far?" Danielle almost laughed at the audacity. What she remembered was being mocked, belittled, told her role was to serve. Not once had her mother said she believed in her. Now, suddenly, success had turned her into a prized daughter. The next call came from Marvin. His words carried the same dismissive calm as always, but this time he tried to sound supportive. "You're really making a name for yourself, Danielle. Your brother could learn a lot from you. We knew you had potential. You just needed to apply yourself." She clenched the phone tighter, her jaw stiff. He hadn't believed in her. He had stolen from her. He had told her Preston's future was the family's future. Now that she had proven herself, he wanted to rewrite history. But the worst came from Preston himself. He reached out one afternoon, his tone dripping with entitlement. "Hey, sis, I heard you've got some connections at your firm now. Do me a favor and put in a word for me. A job there would be perfect for me." Danielle stared at the message on her screen, memories flooding back like sharp glass. Preston laughing while she scrubbed floors, smirking when he called her mom's maid. Sitting at the table while she slaved over dinners he never thanked her for. He had mocked her, dismissed her, benefited from her sacrifices, and now he dared to ask for her help. She thought about all those years when she begged for recognition, when she prayed her family would see her as more than a servant. And now, when she had built her success with her own blood and sweat, they wanted to swoop in as if they had supported her all along. Danielle took a deep breath. For a moment, she considered what her old self might have done: bend, give in, try once more to earn their love. But that girl was gone. Her replies were short and final. To her mother and father, polite silence. To Preston, no. Find your own way. She felt a strange peace wash over her as she set her phone aside. They could twist their words, rewrite the past, or beg for favors, but she knew the truth. Every insult, every dismissal, every chore forced on her had shaped her into someone stronger. And she refused, absolutely refused, to let them use her again. Danielle had avoided her parents for months, ignoring their calls and messages. But after everything, her success, their sudden false pride, and Preston's entitled request, she knew it was time to face them. Not for their sake, but for her own. She wanted closure, and this time, she would not walk away humiliated. She arrived at the Whitaker house on a crisp Saturday afternoon. The place looked the same as always, but stepping inside felt different now. She wasn't the tired daughter lugging groceries or the servant scrubbing floors. She was Danielle Whitaker, the woman who had closed a $5 million contract, the woman they could no longer control. Lorraine greeted her with overdone excitement. "Danielle, look who finally decided to visit. You've been so busy, but your family always comes first, you know." She pulled her into a hug, but Danielle remained stiff, her expression unreadable. Marvin sat in his chair, arms folded, acting as though nothing had ever been wrong. Preston lounged on the couch, his eyes flicking up at her with a mixture of arrogance and expectation. Danielle stood tall in the middle of the living room. "I didn't come here for small talk," she said, her voice steady. "I came to tell you the truth." Her mother frowned. "What truth?" Danielle's eyes swept across all of them. "You treated me like a servant. You mocked me, dismissed me, and even stole from me. While you were busy protecting Preston's so-called future, I was working 2 jobs, studying, and building something real. Everything I've accomplished, I built it without you." Silence filled the room, heavy and uncomfortable. Marvin cleared his throat, but before he could speak, Lorraine stepped forward, her voice dripping with guilt tactics. "Danielle, don't be so harsh. We only did what we thought was best. Families make sacrifices. You wouldn't want to break your mother's heart, would you?" Danielle met her eyes without flinching. "You broke mine a long time ago, and I won't let you twist this into my fault. I owe you nothing." Preston shot up from the couch, his composure cracking. "This is ridiculous. You think you're better than us now just because you got lucky with one deal? If you cared about family, you'd help me get into your firm." Danielle turned to him, her voice calm but sharp. I'm not pulling strings for you. I earned my place. You'll have to do the same. His face turned red, and with a frustrated growl, he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Lorraine gasped, "Look what you've done. You've upset your brother." But Danielle didn't waver. She picked up her coat, her voice quiet but final. "I came here to say my piece. I don't need your approval anymore." As she walked out of the house, the air felt lighter, freer. For the first time, Danielle wasn't running from their judgment. She was leaving it behind, stronger than ever. Danielle had made her decision. Her future would no longer be tied to the people who tried to chain her to the past. With the money she earned from her success, she carefully invested in starting her own company. It wasn't easy. There were risks, long nights of planning, and moments of doubt. But for the first time, every step forward was hers alone. No one could take credit for her victories, and no one could drain her dry. Her company grew quickly, built on the same creativity and determination that had carried her through her internship. She hired a small but passionate team, people who believed in her vision, people who respected her not as someone to order around, but as a leader. Each time she walked into her new office, she felt a swell of pride. This wasn't borrowed success. It wasn't handed to her. It was earned, brick by brick, by a girl who had once been told her dreams were silly. Clifton remained by her side, offering guidance and encouragement when challenges felt overwhelming. "You've got the instincts of a leader," he told her one evening after reviewing her business plan. "Don't second-guess yourself. Trust what got you here." His faith in her felt like fuel, pushing her to aim higher. Victor Langston, too, became a steady supporter, introducing her to powerful connections and praising her publicly. At events, he often spoke of Danielle's journey, calling her a rare example of resilience and brilliance. Each time she heard her name spoken with respect in rooms filled with industry leaders, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with approval. It was validation that she had carved out her place in the world. Meanwhile, her family's absence left no emptiness. She didn't return their calls. She didn't answer their attempts to reach out. For years, she had begged for love and recognition, only to be treated like a servant and dismissed as unworthy. Now she realized she didn't need their approval. She never had. One evening, as she sat in her office overlooking the city lights, Danielle allowed herself to reflect. She thought of the girl who scrubbed floors while her brother played games, who worked double shifts while her parents demanded more, who was mocked for her ambition. That girl had carried so much weight on her shoulders. But she had never broken. She had transformed. There was no sadness in her reflection, only pride. She had turned betrayal into fuel, rejection into resilience, and humiliation into strength. Danielle Whitaker was no one's servant anymore. She was a self-made powerhouse, a woman who had cut free from chains and built something extraordinary from the ground up. And as she closed her laptop for the night, locking up her office, she smiled to herself. The world was wide open, and for the first time, she was in complete control of her life. Triumphant, free, unstoppable. Do you believe Danielle made the right choice by cutting ties and building her own life? Or should she have given her family another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy powerful stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one.